You are at war with yourself and likely don't realize it. Your thoughts, beliefs, habits, and actions often sabotage you. Are they helping you overcome adversity or setting you up for failure? To win this battle, you must connect with your inner warrior. We all have a warrior within us, one that strengthens our resolve and helps us to rise to meet life's challenges. If you're just surviving rather than thriving, then it's time to embrace the warrior archetype, live the warrior ethos, and ascend. If you are a veteran, first responder, or someone looking to take charge of your life, find your tribe, and then be the hero of your own story, this podcast is for you. Join Mike Kinney and Matt Hastings, two retired U.S. Army officers who served in U.S. Army Special Operations and Army Aviation units, as they share with you optimal performance practices they learned in their time with the Military and Warriors Ascent, a 501c3 nonprofit that helps veterans and warriors with PTS.
Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to the Warriors Ascent podcast with your hosts, Mike Kinney and Matt Hastings.
Hello.
Yeah, glad to be here. So we're in season 2, right? Episode 3. So mindset and focus is what it is that we will speak about today. I think it's going to be a good lesson. So one of the things, that we like to, consider ourselves, I'll say, as warriors of the mind. So you may think, hey, we're the Warriors Ascend podcast. What does, mindset and focus have to do with that? Well, in keeping with that, I'll say warriors of the mind concept, it's quality of thought. So some of what we'll talk about is related to cognitive behavioral therapy. And then some of it, quite frankly, is just good quality of thought and argumentation. So we'll talk about some of those concepts and rubrics. And, the intent there being to improve people's quality of thought, because without proper thinking, you don't necessarily have a great life.
I love it, man. Warriors of the Mind that's a great title and a way to think of it too. Just you kind of constantly have to be on the battlefield a little bit.
That's exactly it. So, we'll start off by asking everybody, so have you ever wanted to push yourself or try something new, whether it be a stretch goal or maybe take a compelling challenge, or an opportunity only to stop short and play it safe for fear of failure, or maybe even looking like a fool, kind of like us doing this podcast. Like when we were like, are we going to do this pod? Yeah, oh my God, who are we? But hey, you put yourself out there. Or let me ask you this. So once committed, right, to taking action and embarking on such an endeavor, right, have you ever lost focus on the objective or gotten sidelined once the impediments to your action began to present themselves, right? So in other words, the going got tough, but you didn't keep going, right? So this episode will discuss a few mental frameworks and mindsets to keep you mission focused. So with that, Matt, what are your thoughts?
I mean, it's got to be that everybody can feel this. I know, just coming out of the military and trying to figure out what I was going to do for a living, do every day. I came up with a million ideas, man. I had a drone business. I had, a brewery going to be done. I don't know if you knew, I bought like 5 or 6 buildings in this little town. So I always say I bought this little town because it was a small town and wanted that to become a small fob. And,
that's a forward operating base.
Forward operating base for people.
For those that don't know.
So, and that was big dreams, big, and it got hard and complicated and I just kind of let it go. So, several reasons, like the fear of failure, looking like an idiot, feeling like an idiot. Sometimes that failure made me think negatively about myself. So, I mean, I can. We don't. In the Army, we always call these the good idea fairy, or the good idea bomb.
That's right, the good idea fairy, kill the fairy,
kill the fairy.
No good ideas.
But yeah, man, I think a lot of people can figure that out. Just stop instead of keep going forward when it gets hard.
I agree. There's no paucity of good ideas. So to just vector everybody in as well, and I know there's a little bit of an eye chart. So we talk about the warrior operating system, right? So we'll consider, 1.0, 2.0. We spoke in the first season really about, we'll say 1.0 level stuff, mental health and well-being, very, cognitive behavioral therapy focused, right? So this is, I'll say, bordering on the 2.0, a little bit more high performance. So as we've said that, the Warrior's Ascent, from healing to high performance. Not that this isn't relevant to, people that are still on a healing journey as well, but some of this speaks to a little bit more high level. So again, just refamiliarizing people with the crazy eye chart. I'm going to make it easy. So where this ties in, right? So mind, prudentia, thoughts, beliefs. So we're still kind of in that first segment, right? And I'll give us a little bit more granularity here, right? So we're going to be talking about mind, right? Prudentia, quality of thought, thoughts, beliefs, emotions, actions. The things we'll focus on are the acronyms WHOOP, WIN, right? The growth mindset from Carol Dweck, intention, attention, and attitude. So we will explicate those points in as much as we can do in about 25 minutes or so. So we'll start with the growth mindset from Carol Dweck, right? So for those that want further reading, you can see the book titled Mindset by Carol Dweck, right? So in essence, what she posits, right, is that there are two theories of intelligence, right? The growth mindset and the fixed mindset. So the fixed mindset is one of innate ability. You're either born with high IQ or certain abilities, acumen, or even physical abilities for that matter. And what you got is what you got. And putting yourself out there beyond a certain level is just an opportunity to be found wanting, right? So there are people with fixed mindsets where they're not going to challenge themselves because they really don't see the potential for growth. It's either you have it or you don't. And every opportunity, wherein you put yourself out there is potentially an opportunity to be found lacking or wanting. And that can be, I'll say, disempowering and paralyzing for some. Carol Dweck, on the other hand, says, the growth mindset, on the other hand, is, I'll say, the better mindset, wherein one believes that, hey, I may have certain abilities now, but every time I put myself out there, this notion of stepping forward into growth versus back into comfort and safety is the better option, because every time you do that, you have that ability to grow. And that's really what things are about. So two quotes, right? Again, from Abraham Maslow. You will either step forward into growth or back into safety. So we've mentioned Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And one of the things that we talked about is, self-actualization as being at the pinnacle, right? So again, we bring Maslow to the fore and say, hey, he's got some of the
growth is change, and change is scary. Change is hard. I mean, that's even if it's, going to make a better life, better mindset, anything, is just, change is difficult. So I think that's a pretty interesting, I've never seen that quote before from Maslow, but that's safety, comfort is safety, even if you hate it. It's pretty crazy what we'll do.
Well, I mean, it really is, I'll say, against human nature. Right?
Yeah.
A lot of times, people are like, man, I don't want to put myself out there.
Right.
So another quote, the successful warrior, we're talking about the Warrior's Ascent, right? So the successful warrior is the average man with laser-like focus. So who is this philosopher? Bruce Lee. So that's Bruce Lee. The last thing I'll say with regard to, quotes and mindset from Carol Dweck, and I think this is a pretty important mantra. I never fail. I either win or learn. And that is Nelson Mandela. So it's this notion that even if you fail, it's not a failure if you learn from that failure. And I think that's very empowering. So speak to that, brother, in regard to your military career.
Well, so I'd gone into the military pretty much straight basic training, straight into warrant officer candidate school, and right into flight school. So a pretty weird way to get into the Army. But suddenly I'm less than a year in and I'm learning how to fly helicopters, and it's not going well. I came there as a pilot of airplanes and I knew how to fly. But I get around these helicopters and I felt really comfortable at an airport. I felt comfortable with the radio and talking about things. But this darn thing, I could not hover.
My dad used to say, and he was in the Coast Guard and flew in planes, but he said the pilots that he spoke to said flying a helicopter is like balancing an egg on a toothpick.
Yeah. At first I was just like, man, I don't know if I'm ever going to get this. And my internal thoughts were just like, I'm never getting this. I'm never going to get this. I made a big mistake by coming here. And my instructor pilot and all of the instructor pilots were all these old Vietnam guys. And man, these guys, they had the iron guts because they would let this helicopter get way out of control. I mean, I'm going all over the sky in all directions. And they just go, oh, let's go ahead and get it to a hover. And then finally I'm like, take the helicopter from me. And they just, with like one finger can bring it to a hover. And you just look at them like, how in the hell did you do that? And they just say, time and opportunity. Time and opportunity. That's what he kept saying to me over and over and over. And I'm like, this is never going to happen for me. And then one day, he's like, pick it up to a hover. And I'm like, yeah, right. That's the whole thing. I can't pick it up to a hover. So, and he's like, all right, now taxi forward. And then I'm like, yeah, right. I don't know how to do this. And actually, I was doing it this whole time. And it was my first time. So I could not believe that I finally made that hover. And the whole part of it is how bad I wanted to do it, and how uncomfortable I was willing to get there. And, but anyway, just that helped enable more of a growth mindset, because I didn't expect to be able to do that. And then the next steps in the helicopter, the next maneuvers that I can do on them, the next maneuvers I can do them based off that, beginning stage of a hover.
Right. And in that juncture where you're just learning to hover, did you ever conceive of being able to do, I'm sure, all the maneuvers they'd have you do later, and you're like, there's just no way?
Yeah. Like next thing you know, I'm putting Black Hawk helicopters into, small walled compounds with wires. And it's like, yeah, no, going from, I thought I would never figure out a hover to these unbelievable night vision goggles and dust everywhere and time on target. Yeah. I mean, no, I didn't expect that. So growth mindset, and I didn't know what I was doing. This was like something that happened as I grew along. It's kind of interesting to see these words on paper now and see what those all meant in retrospect, Yeah.
Collective training.
Yep.
No, so I'll say, relating to the lean startup, another book, not mental health focused, more like building organizations, right? Yep. Eric Ries, he talks about the minimum viable product, right? Putting forth the minimum viable product and not being paralyzed by this notion that, it's got to be perfect.
Right.
And if it's not perfect, well then, geez, why bother? The converse of that is, if you put so much time and money into something and it doesn't achieve product market fit, then, you fail abysmally because you've expended a whole lot of resources that just are not ideal. So his concept of the minimum viable product as a means of experimentation, right? Really just in essence to learn. So I'm going to put myself out there. I know it's going to be suboptimal, but that's okay. And then, I'm going to learn, I'm going to iterate, and I'm just going to get better and better. The product market fit's going to get closer and closer. And that's just a good mentality. It's kind of almost like, not theory construction per se, but hypothesis testing is, I believe, the way he characterized it. So I thought that was, again, powerful. I mean, not only, some utility there, conceptually, but then also from like a motivational standpoint, you're like, it's all right to fail. You don't have to be perfect as long as you learn something from it. So
yeah,
I think that's powerful. Right, so next.
This could lead into what Lou Holtz was saying.
That's right. Notre Dame football coach. So the acronym he uses, WIN, what's important now? And not tons to be said about that, but he'd always ask his players, all throughout the day and all throughout practice or all throughout the game, what is important now? What are you focusing on now? And it's, I'll say, seemingly oversimplistic, but very powerful and elegant in its simplicity.
Yeah, exactly.
In that, hey, there's a million things that you can be focusing on, but what is important now? And it may be different at different junctures. It might be, hey, in practice, I got to get stronger. During the game, the next play. At home, maybe it's, wife and kids, whatever it might be.
And what I like about it is that you can control what you can control right now. And everything outside of that, you just got to let it go, because nothing I can do about that. And there's just some kind of, I don't know, it's empowering to me to say, I can take action right this second, and it's going to get me the direction where I want to go, towards my goal, towards my end state, whatever that may be. And instead of just standing there, like thinking about it, worrying about it, I can actually do something again. Every time I just love the stuff that gives me a solution, a tool, a solution, and a way to, practice my way out of it. And so that's kind of what I love about this. What about now? What can I do? Is there anything I can do about it now? Not really. So don't stress.
That's right. That's right. So, my kid plays football. I'm like, assistant coach. Not that I'm a football player by any stretch, but no. So, if a play doesn't go well and he's the QB, so if he throws an interception or something, you can tell he's a competitor and he gets all worked up.
Oh yeah.
All the players do. If they miss a pass or something, it's the same thing. You can see them beat themselves up. And what we constantly remind them is, hey, that's done. What's the next play? What's important now? What is, that's all you can control. What's done is done. And it's simple. It's simple in concept, more difficult in execution, certainly, especially when, it's a competition and winning is at hand, or losing for that matter. So, but still, a very important rubric, and then we talked about, related to that, the reticular activating system. Right. So what's important now? What you focus on, right? What we focus on increases, right? So if you're focusing on positivity, what you're going to do, positive stuff, it increases. If you're focusing on negativity, you get more of that.
You
right?
just see it everywhere.
It's an NLP, neuro-linguistic programming concept as well. And it just so happens, we've got Chucky Jacoby, former Pittsburgh Steelers Super Bowler that from time to time volunteers his time very generously and teaches NLP, basic instructions is what he calls it. That's the name of his company, Mind Mastery. And that's one of the things that he'll talk about all the time is what you focus on, you get more of. So focus on good stuff, focus on
totally
positivity.
Makes sense.
Absolutely. So next, Gabriel Oettingen's Rethinking Positive Thinking. And we've spoken to this, I believe, in a previous episode, but it's worth elucidating again. So her concept of WOOP, right, which is wish, outcome, obstacle, plan, right, is the construct that she uses. Because in her research in positive thinking, what she's come to find is that the very, I'll say, overly naively optimistic, Pollyannish, just visualize positive things and everything's going to be fantastic. And that's usually not the case, because invariably life gets in the way and there's some sort of obstacle. And what she in her research found is the difference between those that, achieved success and those that didn't, that, failed abysmally, was this notion of what she calls mental contrasting. And I'll say the keys to mental contrasting in part of that rubric are envisioning the obstacles. Hey, what's going to get in your way? What are going to be the impediments to action, right? And then the plans associated with, all right, well, when I do encounter obstacles, what are my multiple plans for circumventing those obstacles? So you and I, we've had long conversations about the military, between contingency planning and PACE, primary, alternate contingency, emergency. We had that in the special forces, commos, LZ, PZs, all of it. And then you were talking about, risk assessment. So speak to that.
Yeah. The one thing about this again is that it's action. You're taking direct action on something. And again, I'm all about those kind of action things. And I was looking at this stuff and it's like, this is like a Army risk assessment before going out on a mission.
That's right.
An aviation mission is what I'm used to. But what we would do is we'd sit there and what's the goal? What's the commander's intent? What are we doing? What's our mission? What the heck is happening? And we'd very clearly write that out. And a lot of times it was in orders and things already done. But it was really important to know what that was. And, the outcomes, like exactly what are we supposed to achieve at this? What, the commander's intent, 2 levels above me. What are we trying to do? What are the bigs? And then what are the obstacles? What are the hazards that we're going to run into? And then implement controls into those things so that we can get around them. And then at the end of that, we would then supervise. So we'd say we put the right crew together, because we go, oh man, this could happen. And this crew member hasn't experienced that yet. So we need to put them with a really hot guy on that. Or we move it all around. We do all these things, thinking of all these different ways. And what we do is we take something that was a high risk mission and we've just turned it into, kind of a low risk mission because of the pre-thinking and all the actions we took before takeoff. And so I don't know, when I was reading this, it's like that's what this is. I mean, it's a risk assessment for your life and your mental wellness. It makes sense to me like crazy.
That's right. So with the risk, a lot of people, I think, believe, for those that, aren't in the military, think, oh my God, military is, super risk takers and all of that stuff. And it's a risky, dangerous business, especially, flying aircraft, as you know, better than anybody. But I'm not going to say the military is risk averse, but they're very fixated on mitigating risk and taking prudent risk. I mean, it's a risky business, lives at stake, no doubt, but it certainly isn't, foolhardy execution, throwing caution to the wind and saying, hey, come what may. It's like we try to squeeze out as much uncertainty and risk
as we possibly can,
as you possibly can, which again speaks to envisioning what the obstacles are, taking those mitigating measures and the whole risk assessment piece. And that was a great, I'll call it a metaphor, right? In terms of this rubric and the Army rubric, but you'd look and say, all right, this is the operation that we're going to conduct. It could be training. It could be an operation. What are the likely risks that we're going to see or experience? And then what is it that we need to do to mitigate those risks as much as possible? And before the commander would sign off on that, he'd want to see, okay, what are the measures that you have in place?
Right.
So in essence, it takes this particular model, this mental model, WHOOP, and turns it into
a tool and an action.
Tool or doctrine or whatever it might be.
Exactly.
So no, I think that was a good insight on your part, no doubt. Seeing the relevance, seeing the similarity there. Now, so one of the notes that I made is pre-commitments and coping ahead in CBT and dialectical behavior therapy as well. It's anticipating what's going to go wrong,
right,
and well up front saying, all right, hey, these are the measures that I'm going to take. The other one was the if-then implementation intention. And I believe that similarly is attributed to Gabriel Oettingen, I think. Wherein, much like Boolean logic in computer programming, right? If this were to happen, this risk or this obstacle, then I'm going to do this with all of your contingencies. So you're adequately prepared. And I'm sure her contention is, if you've not done that planning and anticipation of when faced with that obstacle, it doesn't become, if this happens, okay, then, well, I'm going to do this or this or this. Like if you've mentioned before, when you see the red lights in the cockpit, you're like, this isn't good, but I've been through this before. I do this, I pull these levers, push these buttons, do whatever. I mean, if you've never been drilled that way or you've not anticipated that, you're paralyzed. You're like, oh my God, I thought everything was going to go perfectly. I thought everything was going to go my way. And that is just not.
That's why this stuff just makes realistic. A lot of sense. There's tools, there's rubrics. I like to use that word. And it's just like, I know our audience is people who are in the game of even being a veteran, or that you're in the, medical space, you're in fire or whatever. And these things make sense to you. But if you're someone who's not, I mean, a lot of this stuff, take some of our terminology out of it, and it still makes a ton of sense just to plan your life ahead. Go, like, if I run into my Uncle Billy, I know that he always going to grab my ear and it's going to hurt. So I just will stay on the other side of the room and yell at him and run out. You come up with a plan.
It's called coping ahead.
Yeah, coping ahead.
Coping ahead,
this is good stuff. But I know we say a lot of stuff so that our target audience understands us. But it's it makes a ton of sense to me. It helps me think of these things in these weird ways that it just sticks really well for me.
Again, a good mental model, things that are easily, I'm not going to say easily implemented, but remembered.
Yeah.
So the last thing, just, keeping things going. So we talked about mindfulness, right? And it's intention, attention, and attitude. So I'll say the last tool in the toolkit that we'll speak to, for this episode, right, is being mindful of your intention, right? So whether that's in a meditation practice, a personal interaction, a task, whatever it might be mindful of, the intent behind it. Why am I here? What am I doing right now? I say that because so much of your life is on autopilot, and you could be sitting with somebody like, I'll speak for myself, my kid, and my mind wanders and I'm like, versus no, I want to spend some quality time or make a meaningful moment with my kid, versus just, what's for dinner or whatever, and making the most of that moment. So that intentionality, that intention is very important, right? The next is, attention, right? And that speaks to, again, being present. And same thing, when people are distracted, driven to distraction, or, as we've said before, ruminating about the past. We say, regret and depression lies in the past. Why did this happen? Anxiety lies in the future. Oh my God, what's going to happen?
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if you realize, hey, the only thing I can control is the present moment, right? Or as Marcus Aurelius will say, is your own reasoned thoughts, in the present moment. Once you realize that, it brings your full attention to the task at hand. And again, that is very empowering. And it might be a blinding flash of the obvious, but quite frankly, most people don't stick with that. Lastly is attitude, and that's something that most people don't think about. It's just like, well, hey, it's just emergent. Your mood, your mental state, your emotional state, it's just something, it is what it is. It just happens. I'm in a bad mood. I'm in a good mood. I'm happy. I'm sad, whatever it might be. When in fact, you actually have more, again, say in that as well. So I'm going to quote Oprah, right? So she says, you are responsible for the energy you bring into the room. And when you think about that, it's like, well, that's very powerful because you're right. Again, it's empowering, but at the same time, so we talk about in Warriors Ascent, empowerment and ownership. So on one hand, it's empowering, but on the other hand, there's a level of ownership, like, hey, you're responsible and responsibility. You're responsible for the energy that you bring into the room.
Yeah.
So bring good energy for that matter. Yeah.
We have our CBT guru is Anna, and she usually on Monday when you go to the cohort spends 5 hours drilling you on some CBT. And one of the things she said, I had the opportunity to hang around with her. We went to a speech event and she gave a talk on CBT, and somebody was being irritating. I can't remember what the deal was. And I'm like, I can't believe that person. And she's like, well, I don't let anybody be in charge of my emotions.
That's right.
And the way she looked at me and said that, I was like, that is just, that's pretty cool. I've been thinking of that every time I'm like driving a car again, because I'm still terrible at road rage, but it's like, that person's not in charge of my emotions.
Right. Well, see, Viktor Frankl, he wrote the book. He was, a Holocaust survivor, right? He was, I think, either a psychiatrist or psychologist before being in, one of the camps. But he wrote the book, Man's Search for Meaning. And that was, I'll say, one of the biggest overarching concepts. And that is that's the one choice that nobody can take from you, is how you're going to respond, to, a stimulus or stimuli. Right?
That's right.
So that is the one last thing that you can truly control, is how you're going to respond. So, all right. So just to kind of wrap up, brother. So the key takeaways: growth versus fixed mindset. So of course we would recommend having a growth mindset, right? So either win or learn, right? So win, what's important now, borrow that from Lou Holtz, right? So always be focused on, all right, what is it that I need to do right now? The needle movers. Right? And it speaks to prioritization. So WHOOP, right? Wish outcome obstacle plan, right? And the concept of mental contrasting, right? You need to butt that plan up against reality. And if you do that and you have the requisite contingency planning, you have a far higher
rate,
probability of success.
Yeah.
Exactly. And then lastly, I'll say mindfulness, right? So it's intention, attention, and attitude. And always just have that in mind, with every thought, every interaction, every activity. So with that said, thanks so much. Like us, subscribe, all of that, and we'll see you next episode. Right, brother?
All right. Good done. Good job.
Hi, Matt Hastings here, sending a thank you for watching this episode of the Warriors Ascent podcast. We strive to build a community of warriors made up of our nation's veterans and first responders. And to reach as many of those in need as possible, we need your help. Please just smash that like button and comment or share our content. Warriors Ascent is a Kansas City-based nonprofit that aids veterans and first responders with PTS. I went through this effective program and want those that are struggling to find what I found. Check us out on our website at warriorsascent.org.